Welcome to Economic Deep Dive, where we break down the world's biggest financial events and hidden economic truths. In today's video, we explore the idea that Rome fell in 3 days, France in 6 weeks, the USSR in 900 days. And the question rising today is whether the United States could be next. Get ready for a clear, powerful, and engaging deep dive that reveals how global markets, money systems, and real-world events truly connect. Stay till the end to understand the full story. When we talk about the fall of great empires, it's easy to imagine armies, invasions, and dramatic battles, but history tells a different story. Most empires don't fall because of a single enemy attack. They collapse because of slow, silent economic fractures that build over decades until one triggering event brings everything down. Rome didn't fall overnight. It took centuries of economic imbalance, currency debasement, political corruption, military overspending, and social division before the final blow arrived. The last 3 days were just the ending of a story that had already been written. France didn't collapse in 6 weeks just because Germany had better tanks. The French economy had been hollowed out by internal political division, spiraling debt, and a lack of industrial modernization. So when the crisis came, the structure simply couldn't hold. The USSR didn't fall because of war or invasion. It fell because the economic foundation had been eroding for decades. Productivity was collapsing. The currency was weak. Government promises outweighed its ability to deliver, and the global economic environment exposed the cracks. What connects these collapses across time and geography is not ideology, but economics. Empires fall when the system that holds them together becomes too fragile to survive external shocks. Today, analysts ask whether the United States is facing a similar moment. It's not because it is militarily weak or politically insignificant, but because the economic pressures building underneath the surface resemble the patterns that it brought down great powers throughout history. The U.S. today carries debt levels that are higher than any previous empire at its peak. Over $37 trillion in federal debt, rising interest payments, shrinking economic productivity in key sectors, and the increasing reliance on money printing to sustain government spending all point toward a structural imbalance that cannot expand indefinitely. The warning signs we see today are not sudden. They have been building for decades. Every empire in history follows a predictable cycle. It starts with rapid growth, fueled by innovation, strong currency, and powerful trade. Then it reaches global dominance, where its economy, culture, and military influence shape the world. Eventually, the cost of maintaining that influence becomes greater than the benefits it brings. Debt grows, political division intensifies, currency value drops, and the public loses trust in institutions. Once the internal foundation weakens, even a small shock can trigger a rapid collapse. For Rome, it was a combination of invasions and economic strain. For France, it was the speed of industrial warfare. For the USSR, it was the pressure of global markets and internal inefficiency. For the United States, the shock could come from many directions: financial crisis, geopolitical conflict, technological disruption, or even a currency reset. One of the key indicators of approaching decline is the strength of a nation's currency. When Rome began diluting its silver coins, trust eroded. When France failed to stabilize the franc, inflation soared. When the USSR couldn't maintain the value of the ruble, the economy fractured. Today, the US dollar is still the world's reserve currency, but that position is being challenged. The rise of digital currencies, the increasing use of gold by emerging economies, and the global move toward de-dollarization all represent shifts that weaken the dollar's dominance. For decades, the world needed US dollars to trade oil, settle international transactions, and hold reserves. But today, countries like China, Russia, India, Brazil, and even Middle Eastern states are moving to trade using local currencies, gold, or digital alternatives. The U.S. government today spends far more than it earns. Each year, the deficit widens, and the solution has been to print more money or issue more debt. This worked for years because global trust in the U.S. was almost unlimited. But like every empire before it, that trust has limits. When Rome printed worthless coins, people turned to gold. When the French government overspent, inflation crippled the economy. The USSR tried to hide its financial weakness. the global markets exposed the truth. Today, the U.S. pays more in interest on its debt each year than it spends on many major government programs. This is the same pattern seen in collapsing empires. When debt consumes the budget, collapse becomes a mathematical certainty unless the system resets. But collapse is not always a dramatic event. Sometimes it looks like slow erosion, where the empire becomes less influential, less innovative, and less respected. The U.S. still leads the world in technology, military strength, and global culture, but those advantages are shrinking. Other nations are catching up, and in some areas surpassing. China leads in manufacturing and infrastructure. Europe dominates in certain regulatory and financial systems. Emerging nations are rising with demographics and energy resources. This redistribution of power doesn't mean the U.S. vanishes. It means the global order becomes multipolar. And when a once dominant empire loses its central role, it often experiences internal instability. Social division is another common sign. In the final years of Rome, society was deeply fragmented. In pre-war France, political polarization was extreme. In the USSR, internal conflict and mistrust were widespread. Today, the United States faces one of its most divided periods in modern history. Economic inequality is rising. Public trust in media, government, and institutions is falling. When a society cannot agree on its direction, its economic decisions become short-term and reactive. This makes the system even more fragile and accelerates decline. But decline is not the same as doom. What history also shows is that nations can reinvent themselves if they recognize the turning point and choose decisive reform. The U.S. has enormous strengths: technological innovation, global alliances, natural resources, and cultural influence. The difference between renewal and collapse often comes down to whether leaders act early or too late. Rome acted too late. The USSR acted too late. The USSR acted too late. The question facing the U.S. is whether it will take action while there is still time. Another factor shaping the future is technology. Technology has often been the invisible force behind shifts in global power. The printing press changed empires. The Industrial Revolution reshaped nations. Nuclear technology shifted global dominance. Today, the forces shaping the next era are artificial intelligence, automation, cybersecurity, and digital currencies. If it falls behind, the balance of economic power could shift rapidly. This is why countries around the world are racing to build digital currency systems, expand AI infrastructure, and secure access to critical minerals. Economic power in the 21st century will belong to nations that control data, technology, and energy, not necessarily those with the largest armies. A major concern today is the increasing gap between financial markets and the real economy. Stock markets rise while household wealth struggles. Corporate profits increase while small businesses decline. Government spending expands while infrastructure deteriorates. This creates an illusion of stability in every empire. The illusion lasts until reality breaks through. In Rome, markets collapsed when the currency failed. In France, economic optimism vanished when war arrived. In the USSR, the illusion of growth disappeared when the global market forced transparency. If the U.S. economy faces a major shock such as a banking crisis, energy disruption, or geopolitical conflict, the illusion could break much faster than expected. However, history also shows that people adapt quickly when systems change. After the fall of Rome came new kingdoms. After the collapse of France came reconstruction and modernization. After the breakup of the USSR came new markets and new global dynamics. Collapse is rarely the end. It is usually the beginning of a new stage. The key is preparation, awareness, and understanding the forces shaping the change. So what does all of this mean today? It means we are living in a period of massive economic transition. Power is shifting. Currencies are evolving. Alliances are changing. Debt is rising. Technology is transforming everything. The U.S. is not destined to fall, but it is not immune to the laws of history either. Every empire that believed it was untouchable eventually learned that economic fundamentals cannot be ignored forever. What happens next will depend on decisions made now, not years from now. The purpose of examining Rome, France, the USSR, and the United States is not to predict collapse. but to understand the patterns that have shaped human history for thousands of years. When you recognize the signs, you can prepare yourself, your family, and your future with clarity instead of fear. The world is changing fast, and those who understand the shift will thrive in the new era. Thank you for watching Economic Deep Dive. Stay informed, stay aware, and stay prepared for the next chapter of global history.